Does all art come from pain? There's a story about a fox who bit off his own leg to avoid the trap. The fox walked away alive, and so when the other foxes saw him limping, they asked what happened, and instead of describing his pain, he painted a beautiful picture of the field with no traps in it. He used his pain to create a world that he wanted to see. And I think that the most beautiful artwork hides inside of a painful experience. I want to talk about art as a trauma response, not in a heavy clinical way, but like in a explorative, conversational way, a discussion, a curious, gentle, lively, joyful, maybe a little bit funny, clever way. Because I don't know about you, but the artists that I learned more about, especially as I was growing up, the ones who inspired me the most, the more I kind of see that there was this through line that they were all, not all, but many of them were like absolutely not okay, right? Or they were portrayed as tortured somehow. I feel like every young male writer had a Jack Kerouac phase when they were young. We all, maybe I'll speak for myself, tell me if you can relate to that though. I always wanted to be that, archetype of the tortured, mysterious artist in the back of the bar with a whiskey, writing down prose and philosophical, deep discoveries about humanity. The cigarette smoking, whiskey drinking, just kind of messy but open-minded, fluid version of myself. I'm not totally 100% positive on this, so fact check me, but isn't it true that Jack Kerouac didn't write when he was drunk? Yes, he had all of these experiences and they were all truthful, but that he was actually a very disciplined writer and like a consistent writer, which totally tracks. I wonder how much of that perception has kind of, falsely fueled some would-be incredible creatives into a life of destruction because they justified it because their heroes were tortured as well. But being a tortured soul is not fun. It's not like I was completely driven by that archetype at all by any means, you know what I mean? I'm inspired by a lot of different things, but I'm just using that as an example because it kind of did take a bit of that romanticized aesthetic away. I think that we create things out of necessity. We need somewhere to put something. Our feelings, our expression, our experience, our healing, our confusion, our ache, our pain, the parts of ourselves that we maybe can't express or articulate in our daily life. I feel like your emotions are a cholesterol blocking your soul, and then art is the cardio that works it out. Maybe we don't have writer's block, we're just dehydrated, right? Or like our blood sugar. I don't know. That's different. Wait, is it? No, it's not. Is it? Blood pressure, not sugar. Well, actually, maybe that wasn't the best metaphor. Moving on. It's not to say that all art comes from pain, but I feel like it comes from just not knowing where to put something, right? Wanting or needing to put something somewhere. This can be joy as well. This can be a good feeling, which I'll get back to. But first, I want to say this goes back to the beginning of humanity, way before we were here. Before Van Gogh and Frida, Shakespeare, before jazz, blues, rock and roll, before rap, before pop. I'm talking wasn't some of the first artwork that was ever found was 70,000 years old, something like that. Found on cave walls, carved into shells, painted onto stone. I'll never forget this docuseries I spent a long time binging with my friends last spring. Secrets of the Saqqara Tomb, I believe it's called. Saqqara Tomb. It's on Netflix. So good. But even the artwork that was painted in the tombs came out of necessity. It came out of a need to express a message to the next generation. Everything they did in that generation was to communicate so that the next generation could continue to evolve. And they painted pictures and they etched carvings into the walls. That was how they communicated their history. They had no other way to do it. And maybe some of it was just decoration, because they were designing these tombs for the soul to inhabit for the rest of eternity. That was the belief. But it does feel like there are messages in there that wanted to be discovered. And so I wonder if the first trauma dump or the first diss track was painted on a wall somewhere in a cave, You fast forward a few thousand years, just a few. Yeah, I'm here in Chicago. I've been thinking about blues music a lot and the migration of blues music from the South up to Chicago. Very illustrious history around that. And you think of the origin of blues music, it came out of injustice, great loss. Blues music was just pouring out of these South Side pubs. These are songs that are improvised. They don't even rhyme sometimes. It's just pure, authentic, moment to moment expression of pain, and it sounds like it. You could feel it. This music stems out of a long history of African American people and the struggle, because so much was stripped away from them, but you can't take away music. This was centuries and centuries of just weight of pain, ancestral pain, and it was all carried and expressed through their throats, and it is haunting and magical. It's more than just music, because it's like a testimony. That's what it is. It's a legacy, it's a memory, it's a resistance. It wasn't a quiet reclamation either. It's a loud, boisterous one. It's fucking badass. And our brains actually, they like this process. It feels good. In neuroscience, they talk about how making art actually helps us regulate our emotions. It helps us rewire our trauma responses to create a whole new meaning out of our own pain. That's why in trauma therapy, a lot of times it's around storytelling or drawing pictures, or even those ink blot tests, right? Because a lot of times we can't express our own trauma, but we can see it, because a lot of times, you know, when you're drawing that photo or painting that picture, it's an easier way to express the trauma, right? You always see in movies and stuff, like, you know, in the Scary Movie when the kid makes, you know, a questionable piece of art in his art class, right? That's usually a response to trauma. That's a big trope in film and television. Maybe you can't explain the pain, but you can express it in a different way. And we can get practiced in this, and we can become better at it. We can dance it out. We can literally use our medium as artists to express, instead of being kind of, I don't want to say tricked into expressing it, but there's this, sometimes trauma can block our brain, like neurotransmitters, and if we can express this trauma in a different way, it actually helps us get around and through, so we can look at that situation or that trauma from a different angle, getting outside of it altogether, and then we can actually begin to work toward kind of letting go of it a little bit more and seeing it for what it actually is, which is an experience that is separate from us instead of who we are now. We are not our trauma. We are not what has happened to us. We are the grand sum of our experience, but we can transmute that pain and integrate the shadow aspects that it has created in order to become a stronger empath or artist or partner or what, you know, whatever. Brother, sister, father, mother. How can you turn that pain into something beautiful? Maybe that pain informs your mission, right? A lot of people have traumatizing things that happen to them, and then it informs their message to create a nonprofit or something like that. Your pain can fuel your purpose. And then there's comedy. Like, oh my God, we have to talk about comedy. We have to talk about comedy. Comedy is tragedy plus pain. Comedy is tragedy plus time. I've heard it somewhere. I know that it's attributed to like a very famous comedian, I think, or writer. It's clever. It's true. Comedy is literally the only art form that invites you to laugh at the pain. Joan Rivers, Moms Mabley, Phyllis Diller, they were like ruthlessly burying their souls. They took those things that hurt the most in their lives, right? Rejection, aging, beauty, and they turned it into catharsis. You know, you think about any comic that gets up there with that bravery to take their pain and just turn it into catharsis and just share the most authentic, brave part of their pain. Oh my God. And interestingly, that pain that they share creates the laugh that allows all of us to connect on something relatable. So isn't that the paradox as well? How is it that we are under the impression that by sharing our pain, it will alienate us, when it's actually the thing that connects us all? We are not going through these things alone, or we don't have to, I guess is what I mean. We're going through these things sometimes alone, but if each of us are going through these things and we're not going through it together, then it's such a disservice, and what a missed opportunity that is, right? I remember during my time at the Groundlings, my improv training, it was like someone would say something to you, and let's say you made something up, it would never land as hard as if you used something that really actually happened. It would have to apply, obviously, to the circumstance that's, being lived out. It's being, improv in the moment. A lot of times when you're studying how to do more character work, you're using just little inflections and little quirks and interesting observations that you see from your life, and you're kind of doing hybrid impressions of people in your life or people in the world. And anytime it's grounded in that truth and authenticity of something that you've seen before, that you've experienced, it lands so much harder, no matter what, every time. So much more funny when it's honest and uncomfortable, because it has to be uncomfortable in order for it to be funny, right? Because it's got to strike at that truth. It's an automatic and maybe we laugh out of the discomfort, but either way, it's a good way to exercise that pain and realize that we are not all alone. And thank God for comedy and comics who literally are only stand-up comics because of their pain and their trauma. That might be my favorite art form, one of my favorite art forms, stand-up comedy. Definitely. Who are your favorite comics? Let me know in the comments. It is interesting though when you use those painful experiences, when you start to use them for your own art, because there's this inner dialogue that happens in you where you're just like, oh, all right, well, I guess I can joke about that now. Oh, is that funny now? Because that wasn't fucking funny when I was going through it. But there's this part of you that's kind of like confronted with that. You're like, oh, really, dude? Like, I really think that I can just use my own life and experience so flippantly and just throw it all out there as if it was so meaningless, even though it was so traumatizing in the moment. And then the other voice inside of your head is like, yeah, you can. Thank God. Just making sure. Because we want to set it down. I think the quicker we can get to a place of humor around our own pain, that's not from a place of being derogatory of your own pain or cutting down your own experience or like minimizing your own emotions, not at all. Instead, it's more of like you've arrived at this evolved place where you can look back and just kind of like, what the hell was that, And you can laugh at it, and that's how you know that you've arrived in a place of acceptance as well, where you can start to use these things as your own catharsis and as a way to support. And maybe it's not that deep, right? With stand-up comedy, like maybe it really is just about entertainment, and it can just be that simple. We all just need a laugh. The world's so serious. But to me, I like to think about the physiological response that's happening inside of us when we laugh, right? Because there's nothing more uncomfortable than being at a stand-up show when they're just pressing on that issue that you relate so much to. And I love that weird feeling. Anyway, moving on. I'm laboring the point. These odd qualities, or these qualities that we deem as odd or unacceptable, these little shame pockets that we walk around with, that we carry, these are the most relatable aspects of ourselves. We just gotta time it right in order for it to be funny. Maybe we don't even have to look at our trauma like trauma, right? Maybe our trauma and these shame pockets, these aspects of self that we deem unworthy, are actually the aspects of self that are the most relatable to humanity at large. Consider that possibility. And maybe it's not some like deep life-altering trauma, but it's just like a type 5 about some shitty haircut you got in 6th grade. So does all art come from pain? And what would pain be if we didn't keep it to ourselves? Because your creative process, while it's gonna help you, it's not gonna fix what happened. Art doesn't fix anything, but it has the power to change what it means. It lets us look at those wounded parts of ourselves and say like, okay, I see you there. You don't own me. I would like to just also acknowledge the fact that I touched on very briefly earlier in this video, but that art can be expressed through joy as well, and it should be. That pain doesn't have to be translated into more pain. Think of Lizzo's music, right? She's all about positivity, and her songs make you feel confident and empowered. That comes from her experience and how she overcame all of that to become so realized and confident in herself that now she is sharing from a place of love and joy. And I just think that that is such a brilliant, beautiful, timely example of how we can take something messy and hurtful and change it into something positive for others to benefit from. So that's the intention with this YouTube channel here as well, by the way. So I appreciate you watching the video. I hope something in this was interesting for you in your process, in your life. I hope you liked it, and I hope you'll consider sticking around for the next one. My videos are really created with the intention to start a discussion, a creative discussion, and just kind of foster more creativity in the world and deeper understanding for our individual creative processes and our individual lives as humans on the planet. You know, I love this type of conversation. So anyway, that's why I keep showing up here in this space, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care.